Hey everybody, I'm Dave Hatt, owner of Jagasa Games, creator of 1672.
And I'm Anthony Martin, art director and project lead for 1672.
We're here to talk to you today about some story stuff, namely Bonteland.
Yay!
Yeah, right. It's good. It's good stuff. So Bonteland's one of our more exciting nations. It is our high-level intrigue country. So what we did was we took what our favorite elements were from France, which was a major contributor, Czechoslovakia. We have some Russia, a dollop of Poland. All of that kind of blended together. So Central European country-ish was the basic idea when we first put Bonteland together. It has since grown into its very own entity of, well, role-playing derp, as it were. But let me explain. Bonteland was a country that was originally a colony of Amandria many, many cycles ago. So we're talking like 1300s, 1200s when it was first founded. So it was founded because of its great fishing. It has an inland sea called the Golden Bay because nothing's too big for Bonteland. So this huge thing that's almost the size of the cradle is a bay. It's cool.
Yep.
Don't worry about it. Um, Now, the fishing trade went exceptionally well, but one of the Ogren invasions hits and they cull the population of the world. So Amandria naturally, since they were fighting for their lives, thought that Bonteland was destroyed. Turns out it was created by surviving that mess, and those fishmongers and fishermen created a separate nation. So when Amandria finally explored the world again after that particular culling, they found people waiting for them with a different perspective. Um, and since then, Bonteland's become very much its own entity. They have a rich culture with many different social strata. They have royal families that were originally spawned from those original fishermen. They have a peasant culture that's a good subculture and underculture. And they have a burgeoning merchant class. We're going to talk about all of that, as well as all the trials and tribulations of being in and around Bonteland.
Yep.
So,
So where do we start in Bonteland? The big cheese?
yeah, sure, yeah. Bonteland is traditionally controlled by an emperor. Bonteland, at one point, not too long ago, controlled the entire northern continent and had its eyes set south on Fortune. Things didn't go quite well after that particular culling, getting us into the 1600s. So they have destabilized a little bit. Things aren't going quite well in that country, but one tradition remains. The emperor does. The emperor's family is a secreted thing that only the nobility is allowed to really have access to, and the whole concept of the emperor is that if you are not noble, you do not have the right to know his name. Because of the way their religion is structured, the emperor is important. The religion was instituted by the state a long time ago, around the time of their founding, in order to maintain the populace and make sure that everybody followed the same set of mores and social structure. And so, in that sense, it created the nobility because there were certain people that could only worship all of the gods of Bonteland, and then other people could worship a different chunk of gods. And then, again, at the lower down the social strata you are, your options get pretty limited. But there is one for the Emperor of Bonteland, and he's the only one allowed to actively worship that god. And we'll explain that in a future podcast when we talk about the thesis of religion for each of the countries. We want to give a really rich culture, and part of that will be faith in all the various forms that we want to put into the world. So it's another exciting way to build your characters and gives you some real meat and potatoes for the fluff. But the emperor is head honcho and has been, and his descendants, supposedly, for the last several hundred years. Then, after that, we have the high nobles, and the high nobles actually run the country. There's no access to the high nobles. They do their job, and their job is to run the nobility. After that, you have the mid and low nobles, who actually act more like nobles that you would know. They're dukes, counts, duchy, no, not dukes and duchy, yeah. They are the various male and female representations of the nobility to the countryside. The reason why they're important is because the country believes that peasants are objects to be bought and sold. And I know it sounds weird, but the whole idea is that it's a country that needs heroes. We're trying to design a country that is in a really bad state. So their culture has taken a turn for the worse, and in that sense, they have objectified their peasantry, to where they are buyable, sellable, tradable things. They don't treat them as people because they're not. They're owned by the nobility. Uh, that's just the way it is.
And then next on the totem pole would be the clergy.
The clergy actually sits somewhere around the mid-level to high level. They actually exist kind of outside the social strata because they were created to maintain the people's faith and morals and mores. And so they have a lot of unilateral power that exists beyond the government's control, beyond the monarchy's control, beyond the empire's control, excuse me, and beyond anything that any foreign power can do to change the nation. They are integral to maintaining faith and taxes and purging heretics, and their jobs kind of grew into a nefarious set of strange Inquisition-seeming things, but they have a more long-term goal. They're not purging the heretics. They're maintaining the purity of their people, allowing both heroes and villains to interact with the clergy, not having it be the terrifying thing we're trying to turn the higher nobility into. We're very much trying to make the higher nobility into villains, all of them. That may seem a bit limiting, but being that the higher nobility is so disconnected from society, it's not like it's restricting your access to specific regions, locales, cities, states. It's restricting your access to the High Lord's courts, which...
It's almost like you're setting up a environment where heroes are needed.
In fact, that's the whole idea. You have a corrupt government that's run by an untouchable set of high nobility. Your mid to low nobility is completely unstable right now. Yes, I agree, son. In a country that is tearing itself to pieces. At the turn of the century, one of the things that happened was there was this faux pas, which created Rubizal. Essentially, Lord Rubizal's wife, for unknown reasons, because it happened in a high court, attacked and killed one of the nobles. Just no one knows all the situation. She did something unheard of ever in Bonteland. The Emperor, having been hearing of this and or present, rumors going around, no certainties, had all of Rubizal's assets killed, murdered, burned to the ground, which brings up one of the other noble houses that will be a regular occurring villain in all the adventures, is House Vivaldi. House Vivaldi is very much the go-getter house, arms merchants, bad guys galore. They're stereotypical in the way they work, but they have a real love for hating Rubizalis, because it was them that the Emperor sent on all the Rubizalis in Bonteland, which, since Rubizal's purview was to colonize the Dark Continent, left only the people that were in his colony. Bonteland would have done something about it, but just a few years later, Stein started getting a little uppity. Stein also, until very recently, was a province of Bonteland. It was their military and industrial province. It's up in the mountains. It's an old culture that was already there that Bonteland usurped right at the beginning when it got created. But it has a very martial tradition. It has their military academies. It has their forges, their fineries. It has a lot of their textiling in the countryside of Stein. So when Stein decided that it didn't want to be part of Bonteland anymore after some sort of assassination by possibly the royals, oops, spoilers. The Duke that was in control of the majority of the region was the victim of the assassination. His son was of age and took his position and had some differences of opinion about what the nobles did to his father, thus leading to current politics and the separate nation of Stein. It's a mess. To be a Bonte right now is a very confusing thing. If you're a peasant, you've always been a peasant. Your father, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, mother, and everybody else, we're all peasants. So that brings us to, what the hell do you do while you're there? If the peasants are indoctrinated by the church and the nobles are this overpowering regime of doom, what the hell is there to do? And that's when things got really interesting. That's my son. Sorry. Yeah, I agree. So, think about this. We created 3 schools for Bonteland specifically to get the fires of either revolution or change in the peasant classes rolling. We mentioned a burgeoning merchant class. The nobles don't have a hands-on approach to how they handle the peasants that they own, because dealing with classes below the one you're in is considered a social faux pas. It's below you to operate with or associated with peasants or merchants unless you have to. The good news is the merchants are also technically peasants, thereby owned by the nobility, and the merchants have the power and capacity to facilitate things, giving them a lot of unique powers. They don't technically have any legal powers because, well, they're peasants, but just because that peasant's responsible for feeding all of my people or something, I don't know. Gives them a lot of interesting things to do, which makes the merchants a very interesting role, a lot like Dutch, when we had the change of currency over from hard currency to a credit-based currency system. They played both sides against the middle in real life. In 72, it's a very similar thing where the merchants are the facilitators. Like as a for instance example, in France and in England they have the dole in real life, like here on Earth, Prime, I guess, comic book rise. So it traditionally is held that the nobles on our world doled out their extra food to the people, but in 72 in Bonteland, the nobles can't do that. That's against their, essentially, religion. The state-based and the faith-based religion says, don't mess with people below your status. The merchants do it. In the name of the nobles. But the merchant's the one finding the food, setting it up, doling it out, meeting the peasants. Puts them in a very interesting position. You might meet a couple as contacts while you're visiting Bonteland who might have interesting opinions about the nobility, other merchants. Yeah.
So what happens if you're a foreigner in Bonteland? Like, what happens if you're a Portune or an Amandrian and you go off to Bonteland and adventure?
Bonteland nobles accept that foreigners exist.
And
that's about it.
That's all?
Well, they have their own better system than yours. So since you don't exist as part of it, they're very xenophobic because... when the Tempest got lucky and saved the world from the last culling, that was just pure luck because they're barbarians from some foreign desert country. You don't have to worry about them. They're barbarians, just like those Amandrians. They're old and they're dying, so don't worry about the Amandrians that helped create our country. They're just we'll just let them pass. We're the newer, better country, newer, better race, newer, better everything. You could take any elitist angle from the noble's point of view, and they probably have it. At least one noble has that opinion. Because they are the biggest economic power in the world. They had the largest military in the world. They now just have the largest navy in the world. I would like to point out how big this organization was when they disbanded their army. Oh yeah, when Stein revolted. It was big enough that when they lost their entire army and they disbanded all the noble houses that were associated with it, like they took away all their money, their lands, everything, and dishonored them, disgraced them, that their navy, with several thousand different ships of varying sizes, still basically controls the seas in the north of the entire world. It's like saying, yes, we were like England and Earth, but bigger. With bigger ships and more shooty and death. Yes, that's what we are. We didn't need an army. We've got a navy. Okay. It's bigger than better than yours. Made with better people, with better. Shinier as well. But, of course, the opinions of the nobles they're skewed. Everybody that's below them that participates in the military, that sees foreigners and deals with them on a regular basis, understands that, yes, Bonteland's on top of the world right now. It also lost roughly half of its ownership of land mass that it had in the last century. Oh God, and it's going faster. There's a civil war brewing because Stein wasn't really happy with losing their duke or losing their lands or access to food and being ignored by the emperor. So they're thinking about removing that.
Removing your entire religious system and food gathering abilities kind of puts a damper on your situation.
I don't understand why. If they'd just be like Bonteland, they'd be great.
Magna Carta.
And then there's those little problem with the rubes.
Yeah.
I wish they'd just go and die. That's probably the opinion of most nobles.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the rubes all feel the same way now, being that they were told to go off and die. And in fact, that's actually a different social status I should talk about. Rubizal and all of his supporters, when they did the Great Purge, are lower than anything else on the totem pole. even peasants and foreigners have certain rights and privileges in the state. Like, for instance, Bonteland has enough food to make sure everybody's fed, unless you do something bad. That's bad. Don't do something bad because you don't get fed. Rubizalis don't have that benefit. You have a right to security and the faith. You have a right to go to church, in order, and a right to go to church. You don't have the right not to go to church, I should rather say. So, the big deal is that Rubes are not allowed in churches. They're not allowed civil protection. They're not allowed to interact in any way with any of the social strata or the religion or anything. And in fact, the church, doing its part to maintain all the culture, does whatever it can to remove Rubes from people permanently. So it's not a love relationship between the two countries. What else is there? There's the Stein thing, the Rube thing, the religion thing.
Now we get to talk about what players get to do.
Oh, that is a good point. So aside from this overarching and tyrannical government, which creates good crime syndicates and things like that, how do you interact with it is a good question. Number one, we provide you the 3 schools I mentioned. You have the Etsiva. Etsiva is a school that's based around someone who knows too much. You were either an accountant for a merchant that was offed by the church, or you're a Rubizali on the run, or you are a former taxman.
Yeah.
So those of you that read our dime novels, the taxmen are the agents of the church that maintain the faith, the money, and all that. The Etsiva are former taxmen who found something out that bugs them, because there is something a little off about what's actually going on with the royals.
Spoilers.
Oh. But in a very creepy sense, it's not a normal off. The Etsiva are trying to figure out what the hell's going on, because it possibly costs them their job, their lives, their family. And so they're investigating anything they can to get the job done. To do this, they've actually got a lot of cool skills and contacts that they can work in the government to work around. So they're a natural go-to guy when talking about, well, what do we do about this problem? And the Etsiva was like, let's find out what the problem is. Then you have the Chevalier. The Chevalier were the noble houses that controlled the army of Bonteland. The army which was disbanded because of its very close ties to Stein. Most of the disbanded army actually ended up in Stein at the time, and it was Bonteland that drew the line in the sand and said, none of you can go home. I don't care if you've got family or peasants or whatever. You're all on that side of the river. You stay on that side of the damn river. All of our army, military arms, military technology, we don't need you. Go over there and stay there. Oh, God. Because that can't go wrong, right?
Nope.
You can't see your family, by the way, have all the guns? Ooh. Yeah, that's just waiting to go bad. Maybe the Etsiva's got a point. The Chevalier still travels around Bonteland. Because they've been dishonored, they lost all their house. They're hedge knights. They're peasant knights. They were designed, they were bred for this strong sense of morality. They're very close to the church and how it operates, but they're true believers. You gotta remember, these guys were nobles that they're peasants, but they're not owned by anyone. So they have a very awkward social status, which means they can travel from province to province, and nobody can really screw with them. And if you do, the church kind of generally comes in and protects them. You'll see that they can go to certain areas where church operates, and they'll get food, or they'll get equipped, but never a lot, because there's still kind of an awkward thing. The emperor kind of was really strict about that. So there's a couple thousand of these Chevalier that are wandering on the countryside looking for a way to rehonour themselves, or find some justification as to what just happened to them. Because one day they were running the largest army in the world, the next day, penniless on a street corner. And the only people are operatives within the church, not the church as a whole, and the peasants that they are protecting as they're traveling, who have got their back. But they're former nobles. They have some inside information. And the Etsiva and the Chevalier, they would make a good team. But to complete this team, we need to talk about the dirty part of the team. Like all good things, we have the noble paladin knight, right? And we have the chief investigator, who are on a crusade. But what if there was someone who actually knew what was going on? Like, they believe they found it. You're talking like the Fox Mulder fantasy setting style. I know what's going on. It's probably aliens. We will not guarantee that the third school knows what's going on, but we will guarantee that they believe they know what's going on. The Corbeaux are what they're called. They're called this because of what the state calls them. They're not really technically an organization. They're a loose group of individuals that the state rumors is associated with Lady Rubizal's betrayal. And since then, nobles have been going missing or have been found with a little bit of a Jack the Ripper murder scene thing going on.
And it's all the Corbeau's fault.
Unfortunately, they're very angry individuals, but it's not just anger. The Corbeau school believes that there is a form of corruption within the nobility that has created all of this strife in the country. They're not powerful individuals. In fact, commonly, they're just specialists or low-end merchants that were either outed or still have their normal day job and then Batman at night and then go check out these nobles. And then occasionally nobles might end up vivisected. What they're looking for? Nobody knows. But the Corbeau were convinced they know exactly what the problem is. So you get your investigator in the Etsiva, you have your Corbeau, who knows what's going on. Well, that's going to be a weird relationship because one of them's basically a thieving murderer and the other one's a former thieving murderer. Oh.
You know.
One of them got over it, one of them still neck deep. And then you have the noble paladin McDerpsauce, who is keeping everybody straight and narrow. It could be a very interesting party. And you're hobnobbing with the low-end merchants, with the low nobility. You're solving problems. You're wondering, well, why didn't the food shipment go here? Was it because the noble's being a douchebag, or did somebody from the Avalon organization, spoilers, steal it and then blackmail someone with it?
So, if I'm a Corbeau, I've got a Chevalier, which is going to go up front and do paladin-y things, knightly things. And then I've got an Etsiva, which is going to go off and investigate stuff. What do I get to do as a Corbeau?
That's just it. The Corbeaus know what's going on. They have none of the support to actually confirm it. And as far as they're concerned, they need to hunt down specific individuals and then bring a specialized form of justice to them. The Corbeau are supposed to be a little off-kilter, but they are also not necessarily wrong in their methodology. But a Corbeau needs the Etsiva to find the right people. A Corbeau is still a normal, moral they're still people, but they don't really want to mess it up. You can't just haphazardly wandering around slicing up people because of your mysterious cause that you don't want to tell anybody. Awkward. So the Etsiva can actually get them information, which A, will convince the Etsiva that you are correct, and B, help you find your targets, whether the Etsiva wants you to or not. Friends.
So how does the Corbeau go about doing his thing? What kind of skill sets does he have? Like, what does he do as a day job?
A day job? They're doctors. Turns out traveling surgeons, farm doctors, and all that are a big thing in Bonteland. Medicine's kind of still new to the world because, well, Amandria's not good at medicine. They're kind of immune to a lot of it. Portune's kind of new at medicine because, siesta? That leaves Tempest, who is still new to the world in general, who also has a really good medical system because of the way they train their people. I know I'm getting to it. But that leaves Bonteland as the premier nation which has a new medical system. Like, it studies tinctures and ointments and surgeries of a variety of types. Putting them very much ahead of the game, even for the setting, for what they can do and what they have. So these doctors are also in a weird social stratus because they're generally merchant class, they're well-to-do, and they provide a service. But they are owned by someone who sponsors them to travel around, because there's not a lot of doctors that are capable of doing what they do. So somewhere in their medical profession, these particular doctors ran across something so changing, so horrifying, that they need to do this horrific thing that their school is good at. But they do it for the good of, well, the Chevalier does it for the good of the people. The Etsiva does it because they believe they need to fix a problem. The Corbeau does it because there be monsters roaming with potentially the powers of evil.
Spoilers.
And you have to cut it out of them. They could just be crazy. We'll talk about the Ludak and compare them to the Corbeau. You'll find a lot of similarities. But yes, they believe that there are monsters roaming around Bonte. They're probably wrong. Moving along. So, you come into Bonteland. You hit a port. We talked about Gallows Port. I know, I'm getting to it. Always a critic. Every time. I'm going to tell your mother about that. So, Gallows Port is in our new dime novel, and it's the place they put people that don't belong anywhere. And then something happens to them, we don't know what.
Huh.
Huh.
Mysterious.
Yeah. It has the largest prison in the world, though. And it has a large gallows put over the sea that they use.
It's convenient for people you don't want, to go anywhere.
No one knows what happens to the people. There's also the Brilliant Bay, which has several cities which are the face of Bonteland, which is the bright golden cities where they've dumped all their wealth onto the streets to show the world that they are better than you. Well, they'll have all the finest trade, finest wares from all over the world, and then you'll have a separate Bonte market in each of those cities, which will be better than that, at least according to the nobility. So going shopping in Bonteland is an interesting affair, to say the least. But it provides the biggest markets in the world. It provides all these high societies that produce things like doctors and carpenters and various other super specialists who are sponsored themselves by nobles. So these institutes are sponsored by nobles, and then once the institute produces these specialists, the specialists go out and get sponsored by other nobles. Thus the corbeau. The nobles themselves are always infighting, thus the chevalier. And then the church is always interfering in everyone's business, thus the etsiva. And any port town's going to have a blend of all of these. And all of their problems. You can bring great change to this. You can have a whole campaign in Bonteland and never have to leave it. We recommend checking out the world, don't get us wrong. But if you want a political intrigue campaign that could potentially change the course of a nation, this is the country for you. We've designed it to be the ultimate playground for intrigue. Because there may or may not be a lot of things going on, and they may or may not intentionally be dressed that way. And there's a lot of nations who have their fingers stuck into Bonteland because it's such a huge powerhouse nation. So we'll be talking about different adventures of Bonteland coming up soon. But that's the basic introduction to Bonteland, everybody. That's us signing out. If you have any questions or comments, you have the stuff at the bottom of the video, and you get a hold of us, and we'll contact you. Spread the good word. We're still looking for some more support. We are still trying to support the book framing and the art support. We have a new artist, and he is amazing. We'll be showing off some of his art. His name is Josh. Yes, Josh. He's been sitting in on our beta test sessions and producing some very fine works. Yes. All right, everybody, have a great one.